le obedecen.
In this life, everyone is born under different circumstances. Some people are born into wealth, others are not. Some people are born during times of peace and stability, and others are not. And it's because of these different circumstances that people have different advantages and disadvantages in life. Regardless, however, everyone should have the right to equality. Malcolm X was an African American who believed in this idea, and he fought for it through the use of his speeches. So for those of you that don't know who Malcolm X is, I want to share a bit about his backstory. The online biography, an abridged biography of Malcolm X, writes that Malcolm X was actually born as Malcolm Little in Nebraska on May 19th, 1925. An interesting fact about that is that his last name was actually inherited by his family from his ancestors' slave owners. And so when Malcolm X, when he converted into a Muslim, he saw it as being free, and so he no longer wanted to keep the last name Little, and so he instead changed it to the letter X because it symbolizes that, for him it symbolized that he had lost his true African tribe name, and so he no longer had a name, and that's where he got the X from. And so Malcolm was the son of Lois, a homemaker and the mother of 8 children, and Earl, a Baptist minister and a huge supporter of civil rights. Later on, Malcolm moved to Boston, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison on the conviction of burglary charges. He had to serve 7 years in prison, and he was granted the remaining 3 years of parole. After his time in prison, he wanted to further his education, and it was during this time that he became self-enlightenment. He had this phase of self-enlightenment, and his brother, who had converted into the Muslim religion, began talking to him regularly about the Muslim religion, and especially about the Nation of Islam, which was a religious organization. And so that's basically his background story up until he became a Muslim. And so I'd like to talk about his speech that I want to talk about, one of his speeches, which is the Ballot or the Bullet, and why it came to be. The Ballot or the Bullet was delivered on April 3rd, 1964, and originally Malcolm was a huge devoted follower of the Nation of Islam. And so the Nation of Islam was this organization that they believed, and they taught their followers that the white man was the devil, and they believed that the white society was actively sabotaging and preventing African Americans from succeeding in society, whether it was economic success, whether it was political success, whether it was social success. That's what they believed in. And they also wanted a state of their own, separate from white people. And so Malcolm was like this huge believer of that. He was really into this belief system, and so because of this, he was very into it. However, he became disillusioned later on in life, or a little while later, because his leader and mentor, Elijah Muhammad, who he viewed as a living prophet, was secretly having sexual relations with up to 6 women within the Nation of Islam, and some of those relationships resulted in the creation of children. And so when Malcolm discovered this, he lost his faith. His faith had been shattered. He just became disillusioned. And so he was still part of the Nation of Islam. He hadn't left yet, but what really did it, you could say, was he had in 1964 he went on a pilgrimage to Mecca, which is a requirement for all Muslims to journey to if they have like the means necessary, if they have the opportunity to go. So he went, and what happened was that he said it changed his life, because for the first time ever he was able to share his beliefs and his ideas with people of different skin colors, with people of different cultures and beliefs and ethnicities. And so when he returned home, he even stated that he met white people, white men, whom he could call brothers. And so this changed his perception of what he had been taught, and it changed his whole you could say it changed the majority of his ideology of what he now believed. And so his speech, the ballot or the bullet, one of its main reasons why it was delivered or said was he wanted to separate himself from the Nation of Islam. And that was one of the reasons. The other reason was because he wanted to call out and he wanted to motivate moderate civil rights leaders to stand up for what they believe in. And the idea, if you hear the speech and if you read the speech, one of the ideas he conveys, one of the messages he conveys, is that African Americans should exercise the right to vote, and that if the government prevents African Americans from obtaining full equality, that there would be violence for sure. And so that's where they get the name from. That's where he got the name of the speech, the ballot or the bullet. You know, either we get the ballot or you're gonna get the bullet. And so that's why the speech came to be. So the next part I'd like to talk about is what impact it had, what impact the message had on society as a whole. Jeffrey McNeil writes in part 2 of his series, A Better Tomorrow, on May 6, 2013, that months after this speech was delivered, his speech of the ballot or the bullet, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had passed. And so that bill, that act, basically meant it banned the discrimination based on gender, based on race, and based on ethnicity. And so one could even say that it was because of Malcolm's efforts that this bill had been passed. And so even after Malcolm's death, his speech still continues to teach people about what equality is. Furthermore, teachers can use it as a tool to teach their students about the ideas of equality, and more importantly, it teaches people how society should be. To close off on this speech, Malcolm was a man who completely devoted his life to influencing people to do the right thing. It was because of how he grew up and the abuse he endured that it helped influence his beliefs, and in turn he was able to influence people into being better persons, you know. And as I said before, everyone is born under different circumstances, yet we shouldn't let those circumstances prevent us from uniting as people. We shouldn't let those circumstances prevent us from uniting as people. I think that if everyone gets together and we stop viewing our differences, then we can all come to a mutual understanding, just as Malcolm X wanted us to. Thank you.